Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about The Dark That Dwells by Matt Digman and Ryan Roddy, who very kindly sent me a copy to read and review, so big shout out to the authors. Thank you very much. Make sure you follow them on Twitter, check out their YouTube channel, both of which I will link down below. I'm going to keep this as spoiler free as I can. There's going to be plot and then the general review after that, and I'll mark them on the time bar underneath. This book is set in another galaxy, presumably tens of thousands of years in the future after the rise and fall of countless worlds, countless cultures. Where we are now, though, is a universe fractured into two rival nations, Rune and Elidia, their trade and interaction sort of monitored by a much smaller nation, Velen. All human and officially ruled worlds exist in this kind of galactic core place called the Fathom, surrounded by small, lawless frontier worlds, pushing into the uncharted darkness of space beyond, called the Pelagos. Most of the human universe follows the same religion, worshipping a god called Elkos, of which there are these highly fervent Elkosian sects dedicated to hunting down and eradicating smaller religions, most notably the Arcanists, followers of something called the Code, who can channel elemental force through their body in a borderline magic way that, to the Elkosians, is outright heresy. We follow a fairly large cast of characters in this book. Fall, a ranger, a member of an almost mercenary bounty hunter style order, who act as hired guides, leading ships through the frontier, around the frontier, and into the Pelagos beyond. Ban, a high-ranking and ambitious soldier with a traumatic past and a criminal history, sent on illegal skirmishes into the frontier to unquestioningly recover an alien artifact for his nation. Sidna, an arcanist wielder of fire and elemental lightning, searching remote worlds for secrets and forgotten knowledge, ways to access the hidden parts of the Arcanist's code and the remnants of their once great civilization. Antigua, a fanatical zealot warlord priest, the chosen champion of a god and the commander of a warship fleet, hell-bent on wiping the Arcanists out, with a personal grudge against Sidna, the only witch to ever escape it. This is 100% space opera, is sci-fi with a huge scale. Lots of planets, lots of worlds, lots of moving around. The idea common in space opera of these individual threads coming together and a crew being formed for a common purpose. There are a couple of really classic sci-fi tropes in here, some of which I really love. One that I find I'm reading a lot of lately is the idea of subspace, dropping into a lower dimension and then popping out again for a reduced journey time. That can get old pretty quick, so I'm glad that this freshened that up. It's reimagined as this other realm called the Never, which is interesting because in China Miéville's embassy town, they have a subspace called the Immer, which is German for the Always. Not connected, I'm 99% sure, but still odd. So they've reimagined it as this place where there's light, energy, life, in which there are mysterious things, mysterious forces at work that we don't understand. A place you can hide in, a place to be explored, not just a convenience tunnel. And that was really nice. The way it was described almost reminded me of the Ethereum from Treasure Planet. There's also this idea, another classic trope, of science so advanced there is no discernible difference between it and magic. I think that's something that's only really feasible in such far-flung, far-in-the-future sci-fis. It's odd thinking about forgotten history, because we're a species whose culture revolves so much around recording the past, about remembering our origins, remembering our heritage, being proud of that, learning from that. It's bonkers to think how far we would have to spread, how long we would have to exist for that not to be enough anymore, for us to be a big and long-lived enough civilization that we would have the ability to forget where we came from. I think Lost Earth stuff is a really interesting thing to tackle in sci-fi. I'm often not a huge fan of the bad guy or the bad guy motivation being religious zealotry. And when that element was introduced, I was kind of like, But because it was religious zealotry with some actual basis in introducing gods and that being a part of history and the history of what God means in the context of the world build and how that ties into the idea of lost civilizations, tech, magic, and the artifacts the people are after, I was ready for it not to work. But it turned out okay in the end, and I wasn't mad. When reading this, you have these intense descriptions of the characters, more than anything else in the book, like 1 or 2 page long descriptives. And honestly, it's so brilliant for building the characters in your head. While sometimes I have a very tenuous, smoky, what people look like, I like to think that in this, the authors really managed to get their vision across. I get the impression that the writers are very visual world builders. They have these vivid images of everything before they put them down on paper. One thing I do wish is that we got a slightly closer look, slightly more descriptions of the worlds that we do visit in the story. The scenes built, the societies on these planets. That's one thing I really look for in the sci-fi. The story is 90% characters. If you're going into it looking for a character, looking for a crew story, you'll be happy. But if you're looking for these intricate descriptions of alien worlds, explorations of cultures and societal things, there's not a lot. Although, this is book 1 in a series, and I did have to keep reminding myself of that. So I hope that as it goes on, we get a closer look at Rune, at Lydia, at Valen. Also, with the idea of these galactic factions, I feel like maybe the book will benefit from having some kind of map at the front. Aesthetically, I was in my head drawing from a lot of different stuff as I was visualizing the things in the book. The crawling through ruins on a remote world, channeling elemental energy, to me had a very Magic the Gathering vibe, even maybe slightly a Warhammer vibe, while the Alcosians to me had a very similar vibe to the Covenant from Halo, or even the Judges from Final Fantasy XII. One thing I think is going to put people off this book is that there is a heck of a lot of terminology from page 1. Waves and waves of names you don't get an explanation for until much later, so you really have to wait for context. Explanations are short, you could miss them, and really nothing is recapped. So you have to have your brain turned on to like 110% power while you're reading this. One symptom of this sort of terminology info dump and very little explanation of the world build in terms of societies and factions is that this has a very franchise feel. This book feels in a lot of ways like a book written around a video game series or a book written as a movie spin-off, because it hands you words like you're already supposed to know them. I feel like if the authors got a contract to write video game novelizations, they would absolutely nail it. One criticism I had was that it didn't do a super good job of explaining people's motivations for doing what they did. This, coupled with the constant barrage of stuff you have to remember, because it was only said once, meant that while this book contained objectively loads of stuff I love in science fiction, you sort of had to go with the flow, along for the ride, but also be totally tuned in. So this book was exhausting to read. It took me quite a long time to get through. I think this is a book for people who are already hardcore sci-fi fans, have the mindset that this book needs that they can already click into, people who are maybe fans of very complex RPG video games, or a book for people who read mainly for the character interaction and don't really care about the story that's going on in the background. Not to say there isn't a story, there is. With the terminology being so much in this book, I feel like if later runs of this book were to be printed with a glossary in the back that I could have flipped to while I was reading, it would completely remove that element of exhaustion I had, just to get those tiny little reminders every now and then. Or like a codex at the end, sort of Tolkien-esque. I have been informed, since having finished this, that a glossary does exist, put together by the authors. I will link to the glossary. I would say keep that tab open as you're reading this. It will improve your experience. One thing, ending on a really good note, where the authors shine more than anywhere else is frickin' fight scene choreography. It is very difficult to do it. Keeping action fast-paced and consistent and tying tech in, tying magic in, it's very difficult to write something with those non-everyday elements in and not make it cringy. It was fantastic in here. I really enjoyed it. Every single fight scene I was sewn to the page. I do wish we had a bit more in the way of ship-to-ship conflict, because one of my absolute favourite parts in this book was Tiga's ship, the Forge, ambushing another ship in the Never. And that was absolutely fantastic. We just need more ship battles. Please. So I'm going to give this one 3 stars. I did have a good time with it. It took me a while to get through, but I'm really glad I read it in the end. Thank you again, Matt and Ryan, for sending me a copy of this to review. Make sure you check out all the links in the description. Follow me on Goodreads, follow me on Twitter down below. Join our Interstellar Bookclub, for which this was the book of the month for April. Also, I'm on Readerly now. So follow me on there. My @ is Max. If you've read this book, let me know what you thought down below. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, say hi, and I'll see you next time for the next review. Bye!